Hello, friends. This is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the conversation series between writers. This is the last one that I've recorded before I've got a busy couple weeks. I am headed out to Thriller Fest soon. I guess by the time this episode launches, I will be back from that. Thriller Fest and BoucherCon are the two main conferences that I go to every year, especially if I have a book that's out, which I do this year. And, my advice, if you're an aspiring writer out there or even an established writer, get involved in your community. We talk about community in this episode today, and it is critical. It is critical to be a part of whatever kind of writing community you can find that resonates with you, that can give you good, honest feedback, and can give you a shoulder to cry on, because, God damn it, you'll be doing a lot of crying if you choose to pursue a life writing novels. But yeah, the more you can volunteer. I do a lot of work with Thriller Fest. I help out with Pitch Fest and Query Fest, and I'm co-chair of the debut author committee. And it's just great because you just get to meet all these fantastic people. So highly recommend that. Before we get to today's guest, just a reminder, my book, Tell Me What You Did, is out and available. It's getting great reviews and it's kind of taking off. So that's exciting for me. It's the most copies of any book I've ever sold, and it's only been out for 4 months. So it's very gratifying to see something just kind of go wild, which I've never really had that happen to this extent before. So it's really fun. If you are an aspiring writer and you're interested in one-on-one coaching, online classes, or seminars, you can check out my company Unbound Writer at unboundwriter.com. And I offer all of those things. And I'm actually getting fairly busy doing one-on-one coaching, but I do have the ability to take on a couple more students for short-ish term projects, if that's something that you're interested in. Anywhere from developmental editing to, we have copy editing services at the company, to just having regular phone calls, to talk, to keep you accountable in your writing, to talk things over. I offer a range of services. And again, you can check all of that out at unboundwriter.com. All right, let's get to today's guest. So today on the show, I had Ellen Birkett Morris, who is a writer of all sorts of different things. She and writing background, got her MFA fairly recently, and then she has written poetry chapbooks. She's kind of self-proclaimed. Sweet spot is short fiction, and her first debut novel, Beware the Tall Grass, was the winner of the Donald L. Jordan Award for Literary Excellence. This is a book that took her 8 years, and I believe it just came out last year. So she's kind of written a lot of different things, and we go into a lot of detail in this conversation about the act of writing, and she was very straightforward about, it's hard. That's why it took me 8 years. The way she referenced it, I see this mountain that I've got to chip away at with a pair of scissors. And it's, she was able to kind of get through, that's my dog barking, get through writing a novel by kind of framing every chapter almost as a short story, which is her kind of sweet spot. Sorry, hang on. But she was able to get through the writing of the book by framing each chapter as a short story. So short stories are what she's comfortable with, and by kind of visualizing each chapter as a short story, that makes it look like less of a mountain. So we get into a lot of different kind of advice to writers, and just kind of going through her experience writing something that, when she first looked at it, she thought it would be daunting. And, again, took 8 years, but then she wrote another novel that was much faster. So it's also about finding the thing that speaks to you as a writer most, and it tends to just flow out of you faster. Sometimes that takes several books to figure that out. So it was a very engaging conversation, and then we made up a cool little story from an Ayn Rand book, which I've never done before. So that was a first for me as well. So this is a good one. It's a lot of good advice in this one. This is my conversation with Ellen Birkett Morris.
There you go.
That's so. Where do you live? Where are you? Where am I?
Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah,
Born and raised, or
pretty much. I lived for a brief time in Lexington and Cincinnati, and other than that, I've been here my whole life.
what's the um, what's the writing community like there?
It's funny. It's kind of mixed. We have an MFA program and that's a little bit cliquish, but in the center of the state in Lexington, they have a really warm and supportive writing community. So it's kind of a mixed bag. Just kind of need to find your folks and be as
Yeah,
open as you can.
and that's hard to do, right? I find
Yeah.
like to not only find like your writing people, but when you say writing people, it's like just not a writer necessarily. It's like, do they write similar things? Can they give you good feedback? Do you trust their advice? Are they a shoulder to cry on? That takes years, doesn't it?
It really, really does. Luckily, I've found some folks who I feel really comfortable with. And then you've got the whole thing about, wait, are we still being honest with each other now that we like each other so much?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's hard. Like we talk a lot on this podcast about, community and support. And it's so both those things are so important. And support is one thing and honest feedback is a form of support, but it's hugely critical. I find when I'm coaching students, all that they've given their manuscripts to are just friends and family. And then when they give them to me and I give them honest feedback, you feel a little bit weird at first. You're like, oh, I hope this doesn't sound too harsh. And they're like, oh, thank you. Thank you for telling me, like giving me a third party opinion. And that's a hard thing to do with friends.
Yeah, it really is.
And you find over time who to listen to and whose advice you appreciate, but you don't feel in your bones, right?
Right, exactly. You begin to get that radar for all that.
You
Yeah.
do. You do.
Yeah.
So were you creative as a kid growing up in Kentucky?
Yeah, yeah. Well, me and my sisters would make up stories and plays for the neighbors,
Yeah.
and I would write out little stories, on just lined paper and that sort of thing, and so I found different ways to sort of play that out, and also was kind of a dreamy kid who just liked to sit in the grass and stare at the sky, and
Do
all of
you
that.
get that from your family at all, from your parents, or no?
Well, my dad was a writer, so
Oh, okay.
yeah, he wrote detective fiction
Wow.
based in Louisville, and I published them in the 80s and 90s. So I got to see like his whole evolution, which a lot of the time was him just sitting at the typewriter in the kitchen, and
Hmm.
as a kid I thought, oh, that looks horrible, but he spent a lot of time just kind of pounding out those words and working and reworking, and so
Yeah, and that's interesting because it's such a different era. You're published in the 80s. You're not self-published, really.
right.
And contracts were very different back then. I mean, did he find success as a writer?
Modest success.
Yeah.
He found, and because the books were based in a specific place, there were people in our region who were interested and they got good reviews, but, they were kind of genre niche pieces of writing. And so now my stepmother, his second wife, started as a romance writer and then
Hmm.
wrote historical fiction, and she really made a living, which is,
Wow.
kind of amazing. I
That
mean,
is
it was,
amazing.
yeah, modest, but decent living from her writing.
That's
So,
amazing. But your father, did he have a second job or
oh gosh, resume writer, shoe salesman,
yeah, just
you
whatever you
name
can
it.
do to keep the writing going.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's an interesting insight for a kid, because most people I talk to on the show and just in my community as as teenagers or as children might have been totally into books, might have even been into writing, but you don't have a conception about like that there's a person at the other end of a published novel that you see in the library. And so to see that through your father, and to also see like, oh, my dad's not a millionaire because of this, is
Right.
probably kind of an important lesson, I would think.
Oh, yeah, yeah. When my first book came out, which was during COVID, it was a set of short stories, and there was just a limit to what I could do to have people readers find the book.
Yeah.
And it was great to start with really modest expectations, to realize that the majority of writers dwell in that space, that it really is about the writing and the community. And it's not about, I mean, you can have big dreams of wealth, but that's not, super realistic for the large majority of us.
Yeah.
So you gotta love the doing.
Yeah. The love of the doing comes first, almost without question, for any for any profession, unless like you're guaranteed a huge income, because why do it otherwise? Because it's so hard. It's not like I mean, it's fun, but it's not like it's such a, every day is so joyous writing that, you're doing it just purely only for the love of it always. But what did you study in college?
So I got a bachelor's in English with a
Yeah,
minor in political science. I went on to get a master's degree in communications at University of Cincinnati, wanting to get into they were selling a broadcast school that didn't exist. So um, wanted to get into broadcast, but ended up with a degree in group interpersonal and organizational communication. Thought I might do like corporate training. Um, Ended up taking that and teaching public speaking adjunct and group process, for about 10 years.
that's great.
And then I was like, I really want to write. So I started doing freelance journalism. I worked for all these different kinds of publications, writing about, like I had a column where I went and did fun things like taking a glass blowing class.
Sure.
I had a home and garden column for a brief time, which was crazy, doing features and business articles, joined the staff of the business paper, which almost killed me. I was like,
Yeah.
buildings and square footage,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's not so inspiring.
yeah, and about mid-30s, I said, boy, if you're ever going to write, you need to do it now.
Huh.
And as afraid as I was of being bad, which of course is an inevitable step to getting better,
Right.
I just plunged in, and that's when I really began, what was a really long apprenticeship. So from mid-30s to getting published, well, my first poetry chapbook got published in 2012. So I'm born in 1965. So I'm not sure whether, but
Right.
it took years. It took,
Yeah.
decades to kind
Yeah.
of build that apprenticeship to the point where I'd created stuff that was in fact publishable.
Yeah, and it's hard to have context for that. I mean, I'm the same way. I wrote my first novel at 33 without any zero, like literally zero background. And I got an agent like after 75 rejections, same agent I'm with today.
Oh,
But my first three books didn't sell. So from the time I wrote my first book to the time my first book actually was in the bookstore published, it was 9 years.
yeah. Yeah.
And like you said, it's all an apprenticeship. You take that rejection as learning, and like, okay, what. And I specifically remember thinking like I got a lot of feedback that I wrote well, which I don't think was BS, and that really helped a lot because I realized like, okay, I've got to figure out plot, I got to figure out point of view, I got to figure out character development, all these things, but at least I'm not a terrible writer.
Right.
So that was helpful. But I mean, you publish, you still are learning. Everything you
Oh,
write is
sure.
you're building, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't hand that out. They don't hand out those compliments. They don't just say
They
that,
don't. They don't.
right?
Yeah.
They really mean it if they say it.
If
Because,
it's a New York editor
yeah,
who's reading your work because you have a decent enough agent who has the connections, they'll they'll tell it like it is. And what's beautiful about these rejection letters is they were 2 to 3 paragraphs long. And so you collect enough of those, and I certainly did. You can look at them and you can say, oh, there's a commonality here. Like they're saying, a lot of them are saying the same thing. That's gold.
Absolutely. That's serious feedback. Yeah. Yeah.
Why did you and you might still, but why were your initial works leaning towards poetry? What was that attraction?
Oh gosh, I think for me it's that I'm an incremental learner and so, the idea of a novel scared me, but the
Yeah.
idea of writing poems, a lot of things appeal to me. They're how compact they are, but also I just thought it was like small bits
Yeah.
before I got to larger works, not really realizing at the time that poetry is incredibly challenging because
Yeah.
it has to be so crystallized and
And so
perfect.
pithy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But that beginning, I mean, it hugely valuable because that beginning of linking the idea of words and images and the fact that images can carry weight and meaning, and that repeated words can give you a velocity and all the stuff that you find in poetry, and then finding a way to, take a thing and give it a turn, a twist, again, going to be really valuable when it gets down to writing short stories and you need to have something happen there in them. So it was a great training ground. I wrote a lot of bad poetry. Then I started to get published. And then a place nominated one of them for a pushcart prize.
That's great.
Confidence rose. Then I started to take on short stories, which I really consider to be the form I work naturally best in.
Hmm.
And honed that. Ultimately went and got an MFA,
Hmm.
a level res MFA at Queen's University in Charlotte, North Carolina, which was fine on the skill side, but maybe even better in terms of helping me find that community,
Yeah.
connecting me up with folks. And
Yeah, that's interesting. I've talked to obviously a lot of MFA graduates, some of whom, got their MFAs right out of graduate school or right out of undergrad. Some, like yourself, waited a while to get their MFA. And there's definitely like a mixed bag of how much it helped.
right,
But I think what's underplayed again is that community is like, but there's also the other side of the stories of the MFA community that they're all kind of jealous of each other and they're all kind of backstabby. I've definitely heard those stories as well. Because that tends not to be a group of potential genre writers, usually, if we're talking about an MFA program. And my own experience as a genre writer has been, thriller writers are the loveliest people I've ever met, and everybody will go out of their way to support you, to blurb your book, to post about your launch. But I don't know if you could say that about all different other types of fiction.
I'm in a writers group with a woman who got an MFA at Seton Hill
Hmm.
and commercial fiction, and she is that sort of a generous soul, expansive and unthreatened. And it's weird. I get a mix of that. There's some core people I know who are very, very standoffish and
Hmm.
and then there are some who are equally kind of generous. And it's sort of become a bit of a credo for me to just share opportunities, to try to cross promote, to do those things because I know how hard it is
Right.
to develop the work and then to get eyes on it, and it costs me absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, and the understanding that like what I write is going to be different in terms of how I say it. I'm going to be interested in different subject matter, that we're really talking apples and oranges. And for me to draw a comparison is to just create a lot of angst and
Right.
alienation that doesn't need to exist, you know.
Totally. I mean, it's so interesting because, like, right, you said it exactly. It doesn't cost you anything except for a few minutes of your time. And you think about like blurbing somebody's book who's like an up and coming writer. And I remember my first blurbs. I like almost was in tears. I was so grateful that somebody would even give me the time of day to do that. Why would you not pass that on? And then maybe the person you blurb becomes the next big thing and your name is in their book. you,
Right.
you never know because and it's not, I look at other thriller writers like nobody's choosing to buy my book over your book and they're saying I only have $20 to spare for a book. I have to choose one. No, we're all supporting each other and we're supporting reading. Like we're encouraging people to read, which is a dying thing. So why would you not support all the other writers? Because that's the basis of the industry in which you are trying to thrive, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you started, I want to hear a little bit about the MFA in terms of, you kind of had this master plan of starting small, literally small with poetry, moving to short stories, moving to novels, getting an MFA along the way. Did you find it ultimately in terms of the craft, in terms of your ability to move up that path in terms of length of content, was that helpful or do you feel like you would have gotten there anyway?
I think in many ways it was helpful. I mean, I really got a deeper sense of what makes a story work and stuff. But ultimately, when I shifted so I wrote my first collection of short stories called Lost Girls. It was published in 2020. The publisher has since gone out of print. And then I stumbled across this great novel idea. So I'm in the car with my husband. We're listening to NPR, and they're talking about this University of Virginia Medical Center program where children who have past life memories will come and share their memories, and they'll attempt to corroborate the memories with news accounts of the day.
Hmm.
So suddenly, a child with past life memories, aha, that's a fantastic idea. It's a fantastic novel idea. And I'm a short story writer. So I wrote it as a short story, took it to a workshop, and they said, "This is a novel." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh no, it's a novel." And so how was I going to draw that out? So I had to develop, it's a mother who wants to give her son a perfect childhood, and the kid is marked by memories of war. It causes tension in her marriage because her husband doesn't believe there's anything wrong. Okay, well, that's still not enough. So I created a second point of view character
Right.
who is a circa 1960s soldier serving in Vietnam, setting myself up with the challenge of how are these two stories connected?
Well,
So
and the research, setting in the, making it
Oh,
relevant in that time frame.
absolutely. So to 8 years later, it became
Right.
The Tall Grass, which is my debut novel, which is
Yeah.
out now. But I'll be honest, like I wrote this thing scene by scene, section by section.
Yeah.
So I made it an alternate point of view, Eve the mother and Thomas the soldier. And that way I could write short little
You
vignettes,
were
which I'm
writing short stories. Right.
completely comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I just did it honestly, section by like
Yeah.
sentence by sentence on
That's
some
I
days.
mean, that's the only way
Yeah,
to do it.
yeah. And I mean, I jokingly tell people that writing it was like chipping away at a mountain with a pair of nail scissors.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was like, do I have a little bit? Do I have a little bit?
Right.
But ended up building a sort of a scaffolding and was able to create ways that the two sections echoed each other so that in the reader's mind, there'd be unconscious or even sometimes conscious associations between the two stories. And then as I wrote towards the end, when I knew people would be looking for an explanation of reincarnation, I took
Hmm.
myself off the hook by saying, all I need to do is depict this woman's experience of having a child who has these memories. What kind of sense does she make of it? I don't have to explain the unexplainable.
Right.
I just have to show what that experience was like for her and how did she explain it to herself
Yeah.
or to her family.
Right.
And that, I mean, to say that, okay, our fidelity is to character and to the plot we created, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel or explain the universe was hugely it was
Right.
hugely liberating, right?
Right. And it's usually advantageous not to try to explain the universe because you tend to take away from the reader's own imagination when you do that. Let them fill in the blanks as much as, I mean, as a balance, right? Because
Yeah.
you don't want to cop out and say, like,
Right.
oh, I'm just going to give you this vague ending and you deal with it. But if you try to, I mean, it can go a number of different ways, but I think you're right. I think, letting it just sit there and let them kind of relish in however they want to see it is the most powerful thing that you can do. And it doesn't mean it will resonate with everybody.
Right.
So after 8 years, so you write this thing over 8 years. What
Yeah.
was what was the ultimate word count on this?
Oh gosh, I'm so bad. I'm so bad with word counts and numbers. I'm married to a statistician, so somehow it's given me permission to never think about a number
Because it's
again.
literary fiction, so that can go anywhere from
Yeah.
probably like 70,000 to 120,000 is my
Yeah,
guess.
I mean, I think it's like it's on the low end.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like maybe 75, 76.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it's on the low end because again, God forbid I stay with it any longer than I had to,
Right, right. So
being
you
a,
chip away at this mountain for 8 years and then you sell it, which is tremendous.
yeah.
But then comes, oh, I here comes the editor. Here comes, I have some changes. And you're like, I've chipped away at this mountain for 8 years. You're asking me to go back?
Right, right. I know it is. And just but then I've come to realize how often when I dip back into something I've written, even if it's a tiny change, how often it makes things so much better.
Yeah.
I'll find just the right word or just the right transition. And so I'm starting to embrace revision. God forbid, love it. I'm starting to at least like it. So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
hard. I mean, but I think that's where the magic really happens. So you try to like get excited about it and think about the challenge of changing, potentially every paragraph some way, even
yeah.
if it's a semicolon where there was a comma or something like that. And it is daunting. And I think the key is not to look at it as a mountain. You look at it sentence by sentence, like how can I make this better? And that's exciting. It's a little bit of an endorphin rush when you're like, oh, this sings now. This paragraph sings where before it was just humming.
Right, exactly. Great way to put that. Yeah.
But
I'm
it's
with you.
it it's hard because you have to be committed and you have to be fully present in the moment. You can't just sit there and be like, it's good enough, it's good enough, it's good enough, and quickly just skim through it, right?
Right, right. And I've done both things. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
easy yeah.
Yeah, I have too. Um, when you made a comment earlier talking about the MFA program and you said, what makes a story work, learning about what makes a story work. Do you feel like there is a thing that makes a story work, or do you feel like it's just because when I look at and I teach it, so I'm a little conflicted about it because I'm a firm believer in trusting your instinct, trusting what sounds right, what resonates with your
Yeah.
soul, and listening to the advice of others and how it hits them, rather than sitting down and saying, I've got a 3 act structure. These beats need to happen at certain points. There's got to be a twist by the, like, I don't believe in any of that, even though
Sure.
ultimately you might end up producing that organically. So do you feel like when you listen to this NPR story and it hits you, that feels much more organic. Like this is a story that could work rather than let me break this down and analyze it.
Right, right. So I'm a very intuitive writer and I don't outline and I really follow my own kind of nose when it comes to figuring out what the story is going to be. But at the same time, I've kind of developed a philosophy or an understanding that for me, doing a couple different things will propel me on the journey. So, um, detail, like
Mm,
making characters very specific with very specific preferences and very specific desires and quirky things about them and populating their world with stuff, which then later may serve as a springboard for plot or for story or theme or whatever. So beware the tall grass. Tall grass is the thing, right? The
mm,
tall grass in Vietnam, the tall grass this little boy gets lost in when he's beginning to sort of play out some of these memories of war,
mm,
or desire, like Eve, the mother. she's a perfectionist and she desperately wants her son to have a perfect childhood. So of course he's going to come to her all broken and marred because she wants it perfect, right?
Right.
And she's such a perfectionist for her job. I made her a sculptor of tiny clay animals, which she can then smush if they're not perfect. She can
Right.
just,
Right.
throw them
Right.
away, start again. So specificity is a great thing for me, just in terms like that mountain metaphor, that's a grappling hook, right?
Yeah.
Specificity. And then this strong character desire, and then just setting up a plot that absolutely pushes back on those ingrained traits that keeps them from getting what they want.
Right.
And then, as one writing teacher I had said, you know, I said, I'm not sure if this book is where it needs to be. And he said, are you maximizing the dramatic potential of every scene?
Right.
So
Right.
that's the other kind of thing I throw into the mix. And sometimes I'm not, like, I'm not getting people into enough trouble, and I'm not making this as dramatic as it
Right.
could be.
Right.
So yeah, so I have like those little signposts just to help me along the way
Right.
as I imagine my way into the story.
And it's and that idea of conflict in every scene, I think when you teach that, it gets taken as this like there's got to be a fight. And you like conflict can be the way somebody looks in the mirror. It can be anything. It can just be this weight, this obstacle that either is defined or just a mood. And I think people don't quite, a lot of writers don't quite get that. So when I'm reviewing manuscripts, a lot of times it's either there is a fight in every scene and it's exhausting,
Yeah.
or you read a lot of scenes and then just nothing happens. And and I think sometimes people are like, well, it's literary, so nothing has to happen. Well, like, well, no, things have to happen. It can't just all be a character study. uh,
Right,
and
right.
then with your enumeration of these characters idiosyncrasies, is this like you keep a document where you're like, okay, here's Tallgrass and here are all the idiosyncrasies and all the habits for this person and this character. This is everything I know about them.
Yeah, I don't really write anything down. I just
Yeah.
don't do any additional work at all in terms of
You're
writing it
the
down.
you're the writer
It's
who
just
hates to write.
it's
Yeah.
just kind of in my head,
Right.
it's just kind of in my head. And I give them a backstory, that sort of jives with what else is happening. And those moments of discovery, like Eve is the perfectionist mother with the kid who has the past life memories. Well, her husband, Dan, had his mother was addicted to television psychics and lost a lot of the family's money to that. So when his wife comes and says, I think our kid is having past life memories, he's like, no way am I going back down that rabbit
Oh,
hole of,
that's interesting. That's a
yeah,
great little touch there because
yeah, yeah.
that is quirky.
Yeah, so just kind of trying to find those kinds of things that are different enough to just complicate the mix
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from, poetry chapbooks to short stories to now a debut novel, where do you see yourself going or evolving next?
Yeah, so right now I've got a completed set of short stories, all centered around various types of homes that I am trying to find a publisher for. So I'm sending it to the usual small press contest. I've queried some agents. A lot of agents don't really want to touch short stories,
Yeah.
but I'm still doing that. And then I'm really looking for an agent for a book that's completed that is part romance,
Hmm.
part celestial discovery, part a mother-daughter love story because the mother's sick and the daughter goes away
Hmm.
for a fellowship in astronomy in Hawaii. And when she gets there, she gets involved in a love triangle and a celestial discovery. She gets romantically linked to a guy who's protesting the use of telescopes on mountaintops.
Hmm.
And so it's a very mixed up, but I mean, tone wise, and it's kind of a romp, whereas
Yeah.
Tallgrass was really kind of serious.
Yeah.
So
Was that
I'm
faster to write?
it was, yeah,
Yeah.
much faster to
Yeah.
write, and I think it's got a broader sort of appeal,
Sure.
really.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking,
Yeah.
I'm sending out those queries and Fingers crossed.
That's
So,
great. Well,
yeah.
Ellen, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to get to the storytelling part of our show, which you're aware of. It's the making it up part where I've chosen 3 books quasi at random from my bookshelf. You're going to choose one of them, and we're going to choose a random sentence from a random page, and that sentence will be the first sentence in a very short story that we can do whatever we want with. So I'll read that sentence. You give me the next sentence or two. I'll do a sentence or two, and then we'll kill it when it gets beyond terrible. We're going with some classics here. I've got To Kill a Mockingbird, Farewell to Arms, and Ayn Rand's We the Living. So choose one of those.
Let's go with We the Living. I've not read it, so I'm hoping there will be something really inspiring in there.
It has been a long time since I've read it. So give me a number between 1 and 450.
Oh, 375.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly scan page 375 and just find something that might work. And then you can go in whatever direction you want with this. All right, we're talking about a chief. I think it's I don't know, the chief, however we want to determine what the chief is. The chief was a tall, thin man with a pointed blonde beard and a gold pince-nez on a high, thin nose.
Ah. Though he proclaimed to like people, the chief was really an introvert.
Which made my job much more difficult, and I still didn't understand why the group chose me to be the emissary to the chief. They told me not to come back until I got the one thing I knew the chief would be most unwilling to part with.
It was a small, slim volume tucked in the middle of many, many books on his shelf. You wouldn't know what it was if you didn't know what to look for, but its gold lettering gave it away. And as soon as I entered the room, I noticed it.
I had no idea if the chief knew the value of the book, not because the pages or the editions was anything special, but it was a single sheet of folded paper that I knew would be about halfway into the volume that held all the value in the world.
The truth is, the chief had long forgotten the letter that was tucked into the book and was unlikely to remember its existence at all. So my job of getting the book was made more complicated by this.
The least complicated thing about the situation was the 30 gauge snub-nose revolver tucked into the back of my waistband that I knew as a last gesture would be the way of getting the book, but I dearly hoped it wouldn't come to that.
So instead, I sat across from him as he sat at his desk and began to engage in a conversation about his library.
I think we call it there.
I think we might.
I can picture it.
Yeah, me too.
That was cool. We've never done an Ayn Rand book before, so that's we're breaking territory here, Ellen.
Right. All right.
Well, what a pleasure to talk to you, and congratulations on the success you've had. And I'm dying to know what comes of your next novel, if it gets where it gets published, and how it gets received. It sounds like a great story.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. It was a delight.
All right, take care, Ellen.
You too. Bye.
Bye. All right, that is it. That is my conversation with Ellen Birkett Morris. Please check out her debut novel, Beware the Tall Grass, and you can read more about her and buy her other works all at ellenbirkettmorris.com. unboundwriter.com. And pop on over to carterwilson.com. You can buy my books. You can sign up for my newsletter. You can read my blog, all that good stuff. You can see more episodes of Making It Up. And then head on over to unboundwriter.com if you're interested in any kind of writing coaching services. And I'll also just note, I do offer complimentary calls. So you can sign up on my website and we can just have a free 20-minute call just to see where your head's at, what you're looking for, and see if we might be a good fit. That's all at unboundwriter.com. All right, friends, that is it. That is it for this episode of Making It Up. Another one out just next week. As always, thanks for watching and listening. Take care.